My name is Sophia Lane, and if you looked at me now, you'd probably think I always had it together. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan office, the city stretches out like a living, breathing painting. Glass towers catching the morning sun, the buzz of yellow cabs weaving through traffic far below, and me, sitting behind a mahogany desk polished so perfectly it reflects the shimmer of my silk blouse. On the surface, it looks like power, success, control. But there's a quiet truth hidden beneath all of this. I built it from ashes, from humiliation, from words that once cut so deep I thought I might never recover. My phone buzzes against the glass tabletop, snapping me back. The name flashing on the screen makes me pause. My fingers hover, nails tapping lightly, almost rhythmically, against the edge. Jonathan Pierce. I can almost hear his voice echoing from years ago, mocking, sharp, dripping with disdain. He once laughed at my effort, my ideas, my determination. I remember how small he made me feel, as if my ambition was a joke. But today, the irony is almost poetic. He doesn't know it yet, but the meeting he just requested will decide his company's future. And the decision rests entirely in my hands. I take a slow breath, smoothing the edge of my blazer, steadying my voice. The past has finally come knocking, and I'm ready to answer. I was 23 the first time Jonathan Pierce humiliated me. Fresh out of college, clutching my degree like it was a golden ticket, I walked into Pierce and Company convinced that hard work and bright ideas could make up for inexperience. The office was all glass walls and sharp suits, a place where confidence seemed to hang in the air like expensive cologne. I was eager, too eager maybe, pitching late-night ideas, staying after hours, always desperate for someone to notice. And then came the meeting, the one that still burns in my memory. I had spent days preparing a strategy presentation. My hands shook as I clicked through the slides, my voice steady at first, then faltering when I noticed Jonathan's smirk. He didn't even wait until I finished. "This," he said, chuckling, leaning back in his leather chair. "This is the kind of work I'd expect from an intern, not a professional." Cute effort, though. The laughter from a few colleagues stung worse than the words. My throat tightened, eyes prickling with tears I refused to shed in front of him. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. That night, I sat in the office bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror under the harsh fluorescent light. Mascara smudged, lips trembling, I whispered, "Don't let him break you." When I got home, I pulled open my dresser drawer and found the small silver locket my grandmother had given me. Inside was a tiny engraving, "Strength isn't loud, it's steady." She used to tell me, "Sophia, people will try to shrink you because they're afraid of your fire. Don't hand them the match." I remember closing my fist around that locket, the cool metal pressing into my palm, and making a silent vow, I won't give him the satisfaction of seeing me quit. But I will leave. And when I rise, it'll be far beyond his reach. 2 weeks later, with trembling hands but steady resolve, I handed in my resignation. Jonathan barely looked up from his papers when I told him. "Good luck out there," he said, dismissively, as if I was already destined to fail. He didn't know he was fueling the very fire that would one day burn brighter than his own empire. Walking away from Pierce and Company felt less like quitting and more like stepping into a storm without an umbrella. My savings were thin, my confidence thinner, but I carried that locket in my pocket like armor. The first few months were brutal. I took on freelance consulting gigs, the kind of projects nobody else wanted, messy accounts, small businesses barely hanging on. I worked from my cramped studio apartment, where the sound of traffic was my background music and takeout containers piled on my desk like trophies of exhaustion. There were nights I cried into my pillow, asking myself if Jonathan had been right all along. But each morning, I'd pull my hair back into a messy bun, pour coffee into a chipped mug, and tell myself, "One more step, Sophia. Just one more." And then, a door cracked open. Her name was Evelyn Brooks, a seasoned venture capitalist, sharp as glass, but with a warmth that reminded me of my grandmother. She had seen one of my case studies floating around on a small business blog and asked me to meet her for coffee. I still remember sitting across from her in that cafe, hands shaking as I held my latte. Evelyn leaned in and said, "You've got an eye for strategy most people spend decades developing. Stop selling yourself short." Her words were oxygen. She became my mentor, guiding me through the labyrinth of startups, investments, and boardrooms. She didn't shield me from the work, she challenged me harder than anyone else ever had. The years that followed were a blur of sacrifice and small victories. I learned how to negotiate deals at midnight, how to pitch to investors who barely looked at me until I forced them to listen, how to survive on ramen noodles while I funneled every dollar into my fledgling firm. My first big break came from a family-owned tech company on the brink of collapse. I restructured their model, fought tooth and nail to secure funding, and within a year, they were not only solvent but thriving. Their success was my first proof of concept. Word spread quietly. More companies came. More deals. Slowly, painfully, my little consultancy grew into something real, Lane Strategies LLC. And yet, I kept my cards close to my chest. On social media, I posted modest updates, a new office chair, a blurry photo of coffee on my desk, vague captions like "busy day." My old colleagues, my parents, even friends had no idea the empire I was building brick by brick. It wasn't about secrecy for secrecy's sake. It was about protection. I didn't want Jonathan, or anyone like him, to ever see me as a threat until the moment I chose to reveal it. Every late night, every missed birthday, every rejection email became fuel. I wasn't just proving Jonathan wrong anymore. I was proving me right. And by the time Lane Strategies was worth 8 figures, with offices overlooking the same skyline I once admired from the sidewalk, I realized something profound. I hadn't just survived. I had become the storm I once feared. The day Jonathan Pierce walked into my office, the universe felt like it had written a script just for me. He arrived with his usual air of entitlement, a tailored suit, and that same smirk I remembered all too well. But beneath the polished exterior, I saw something I had never seen in him before: desperation. "Ms. Lane," he said, extending his hand as if we were old colleagues instead of a man who once laughed me out of a room. "Thank you for taking the time to meet. I'm sure your schedule is demanding." I let him wait a moment before standing. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked toward him. I shook his hand firmly, holding his gaze. "It is. But I make time for things that matter." He followed me into the conference room, his eyes scanning the space. The walls were lined with modern art, pieces I had chosen not for their price tag, but for their story. The polished oak table stretched the length of the room, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. On the shelves sat subtle tokens of my journey: a framed first dollar earned, a photo of me and Evelyn at a conference, even the silver locket, resting in a glass case. Jonathan's jaw tightened when he noticed it. I could tell he recognized it. He used to mock me for wearing it to work. "Impressive setup you've got here," he muttered, trying to sound casual. I sat at the head of the table, motioning for him to take a seat across from me. For a moment, silence filled the room, stretching thin like glass about to crack. Finally, he launched into his pitch. His company, once untouchable, was bleeding. Investors were pulling out, debts mounting. He needed new funding that, unbeknownst to him, flowed directly through my firm. As he spoke, I leaned back, studying him. His confidence was still there, but it was fragile, forced. Every time his voice wavered, every time his hand tapped nervously against the table, I felt the echo of that younger version of me, the girl who once trembled under his ridicule. But today it wasn't my hands shaking. It was his. When he finished, he exhaled, clearly expecting me to nod, to rush in with reassurance. Instead, I let the silence linger. "Jonathan," I said finally, my voice calm, measured. "Do you remember the day you told me my work was, what was it again?" His brows knit together. I don't recall." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "You said it was the kind of work you'd expect from an intern. That my effort was cute." His face flushed. For once, words failed him. I continued, steady and deliberate. "That was the day I decided I'd never let you, or anyone like you, define my worth. And now here you are, sitting in front of me, asking for my approval, my funding. The realization hit him like a wave. His lips parted slightly, his eyes darting to the window, then back to me. You're behind Lane's strategies? I allowed a small smile. I am Lane Strategies. The silence was deafening. His arrogance crumbled, replaced by something raw. Shame. I didn't need to raise my voice. My presence filled the room. Every piece of art on the walls, every polished surface, every detail of that office was a testament to the empire I had built, the empire he once mocked me for even dreaming of. For the first time in my life, Jonathan Pierce was forced to see me. Not as a naive girl fumbling through her slides. Not as an employee desperate for approval. But as the woman who held the fate of his company in her hands. And I could see it in his eyes. He finally understood. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his polished confidence cracking. For years, he had been the one commanding the room, but here, today, he was just another man asking for help. I folded my hands on the table, my voice calm. You're asking for millions in funding. Money that will decide whether your company sinks or survives. And right now, I'm the one holding the pen that approves it. He nodded quickly, his smile strained. Exactly. Which is why I know you'll see the value in. I raised a hand, cutting him off. Don't mistake my presence for your past authority, Jonathan. This isn't Pierce and Company. You don't mock me here. You don't dismiss me here. You don't laugh at my effort here. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. I understand. Do you? I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. Because understanding means more than sitting in that chair. It means owning what you did. Not just to me, but to every young woman you belittled, every voice you silenced because it didn't fit your ego. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, Jonathan Pierce had no clever comeback. I let the silence hang before continuing. Here are my conditions. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, neatly typed, were non-negotiables. 1. Full transparency on all financial dealings. Every dollar accounted for. 2. A written apology, yes, written, to the employees you've bullied and to me. I want it documented, not whispered in some back room. He blinked, his jaw tightening, but he didn't protest. 3. I said, my voice firm but not unkind. You will build a mentorship program for young women in your firm. Paid internships. Real opportunities. Not empty gestures. His lips pressed together. He looked at me like the words cost him more than the money he was begging for. And 4, I said, softening slightly, you will learn humility. If I hear even a whisper of the old Jonathan, the one who mocked, the one who crushed instead of lifted, you'll lose every cent. I'll pull the funding faster than you can blink. His face was pale now, but I could see the shift. He wasn't just desperate, he was realizing what this meant. That the woman he once treated as insignificant was now rewriting the terms of his survival. He finally spoke, his voice low, almost hoarse. And if I agree? I sat back in my chair, calm, collected. Then you'll get your funding. But understand this, Jonathan, it won't be charity. It will be earned. On my terms, not yours. He nodded slowly, defeated, but aware that he had no choice. And in that moment, I felt a strange mix of triumph and compassion. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. Balance. Proof that people can grow when forced to confront the weight of their own arrogance. For years, he had held power over me with nothing more than words. Now, my words held power over him, and the conditions I set weren't just about business. They were about rewriting the story. Weeks passed after that meeting, and true to my conditions, Jonathan complied. Begrudgingly at first, like every word he typed in that apology burned his pride. But he did it. And more importantly, I began to see changes ripple through the company that had once been built on arrogance. The mentorship program launched quietly, but within months, young women filled those halls with ideas and ambition that could no longer be dismissed. They reminded me of myself, bright-eyed, nervous, carrying dreams that felt too heavy. And this time, instead of being mocked, they were given room to grow. I watched from a distance, never forgetting the sting of my past, but allowing the present to soften it. Because power without purpose is hollow. My conditions weren't about control, they were about creating a cycle of respect where none had existed before. One evening, long after the office lights had dimmed, I stood by my window, the city glowing like a galaxy below. I reached into the glass case on my shelf and pulled out the silver locket. My grandmother's words echoed again. Strength isn't loud, it's steady. I turned it over in my hand, feeling the cool metal against my skin, and I realized she had been right all along. My strength hadn't come from shouting louder than Jonathan, or from proving him wrong in a single moment. It had come from every steady step forward. Every night I chose persistence over surrender. Every time I turned pain into fuel. I smiled softly, closing the locket in my palm. Jonathan Pierce would always remember me as the woman who held the fate of his company in her hands. But I would remember myself as the woman who rose from his mockery and built something far greater than revenge. Because this was never about him. It was about me, about reclaiming the voice he once tried to silence. And now, with the skyline stretched endlessly before me, I whispered to the city, to myself, to the young girl I once was. My boss mocked my effort, now I control his funding. The words weren't just a twist of fate. They were the truth of my journey. A reminder that the fire inside me had never gone out. It had only been waiting to light the world.